These three fake HOA cops really tried to forcefully detain my son, like they had any authority to put their hands on him. One had his knee jammed between my boy's shoulder blades, pinning him to the pavement. Another gripped a baton like he couldn't wait to use it. And the third had a knife halfway out of his belt, fingers tied around the handle, as if dragging a weapon on a teenager was part of his job description. They thought some made-up HOA bylaw gave them the right to snatch a kid off the road. They thought a cheap uniform with HOA cop printed on the front meant power. They thought I wouldn't be home. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that they were seconds away from picking a fight with a Navy SEAL. Because the moment I saw my son pinned to the ground, terrified, his voice cracking as he begged them to stop, something inside me went cold and razor sharp. And those three men were about to learn what that meant. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. To understand why this even happened, you need the backstory. My name's Cole, retired Navy SEAL. Moved to this neighborhood for peace, not problems. My son Ethan is 16, smart, decent, never been in trouble a day in his life. He's the kid who helps neighbors carry groceries and mows lawns for free when someone's sick. But none of that mattered to Karen. Karen, the HOA president, was the type of person who believed the entire neighborhood existed to obey her. Clipboards, binoculars, weekly emails full of violations. She'd nitpick trash cans, mailbox spacing, even the tone of porch lights. But what really set her off was the argument her son started with Ethan at the community pool. Her kid shoved mine, Ethan shoved back. Normal teenage stuff, except Karen treated it like a federal case. The next morning, we got a letter taped to our door. HOA Youth Conduct Bylaw 19, a mandatory disciplinary hold pending review. A disciplinary hold for teens arguing. I actually laughed. I thought it was a prank. But then the letters kept coming. Then the threats. Then the fines for parental negligence. Then the warnings that Ethan must appear for corrective custody. Corrective custody? Over a pool argument. I ignored them because they weren't real. Karen made up every line. But Karen didn't like being ignored. For the next 2 weeks, I noticed the same three men lurking around our street. Boots, uniforms, tactical belts, radios that didn't actually have batteries. They knocked on doors, harassed neighbors, and stared at my property like they were scouting it. I told them once clearly to stay away from my son. They didn't listen. And today, they crossed the line I warned them about. I stepped outside just in time to see Ethan shoved to the pavement, his face twisted in panic as the man, with the baton pressed closer, barking, "You're being detained under HOA authority. HOA authority over my dead body." I took one slow step forward, then another. The knife holder finally noticed me and froze, his hand still on the blade. "Sir, stay back," he barked. "This doesn't concern you." He was wrong. This concerned me more than anything in the world because they had their hands on my son, and in the next few seconds, they were going to regret it. "Release my son," I said calmly. "Now!" the baton guy scoffed. "Sir, failure to comply will." He never finished that sentence because I closed the distance between us before any of them realized I'd moved. The knife holder's hand twitched toward his belt. Wrong move. I seized his wrist, twisted it down and away, and his grip collapsed instantly. His knees buckled as I redirected his momentum, sending him stumbling backward in a heap. The knife clattered uselessly across the pavement. The second fake cop, the one pressing his knee into Ethan's spine, looked up just as I punched his ribs, grabbed the back of his vest, and ripped him off my son with a force that lifted him clean off the ground. He hit the street hard, air exploding from his lungs. "Dad!" Ethan scrambled toward me, gripping my arm. "I've got you," I said, pulling him behind me. "Stay back." The Baden guy charged next, swinging wide, sloppy, panicked. The kind of strike you throw when you've never trained a day in your life. I stepped inside the arc, trapped his arm, and redirected the force downward. The Baden hit the pavement first. He followed right after, collapsing to his knees. He tried to get up. I made sure he didn't. The first fake cop regained just enough courage or stupidity to rush me from behind. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. I pivoted, used his momentum, and sent him sprawling across the grass. He didn't get up quickly either. Neighbors were pouring out onto porches now. Phones were up. Gasps, shouts, whispers, all of it blending into background noise. All I focused on was the final man still trying to crawl toward the Baden, wheezing like he'd lost a fight with gravity. "Don't," I warned. He froze for a moment. No one moved. Just 3 fake cops lying on the street, and me standing between them and my son. And then a shrill voice shattered the brief silence. "Karen!" Her SUV screeched to a stop. She launched herself out of the driver's seat like a malfunctioning firework. "What did you do to my officers?" "Officers?" A neighbor muttered. "Lady, they jumped a kid. They were executing an authorized youth detainment protocol." Karen screeched, waving a stack of papers, probably more made-up bylaws. Section 19A allows the HOA to correct delinquent minors. I pointed at the knife still lying in the street. "Your men brought a weapon to detain a 16-year-old. Karen hesitated, a flicker of fear before she doubled down. "You assaulted them. You and your son will both be expelled from this community." I stepped forward just enough for her to understand the message without me saying a word. "You sent armed men after my boy," I said quietly. "This ends today." And that's when the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Someone had already called the real police. Karen palled. The fake cop stopped pretending to be brave, and Ethan finally exhaled behind me, because the moment those sirens hit the street, everything Karen had built was about to collapse. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe, because the story is only going to get better. The police cruisers rolled in fast. No hesitation, no confusion. The moment they stepped out and saw 3 grown men in mismatched HOA cop uniforms sprawled on the pavement, weapons visible, a teenager shaken behind me, and half the neighborhood recording, the whole situation shifted. One officer approached cautiously. "Sir, step back. Is anyone armed?" I pointed to the knife lying in the street. "He was," I said. "They detained my son. No authority, no cause." Ethan stood right behind me, still gripping my arm. The officer glanced at him, saw the fear in his eyes, the dirt on his clothes, the red marks on his wrists where they grabbed him. That was all it took. Officers moved in on the fake cops immediately. "Hands behind your back. Don't move." The men didn't even argue after the beating they'd taken, and after realizing real law enforcement had arrived, whatever fake confidence they'd had was gone. Karen stormed forward, waving her binder of imaginary rules like it was the Constitution. "Officer, these men were carrying out an HOA youth detainment order under Section 19A. "Arrest him," she screamed, jabbing a finger at me. The officer stared at her like she'd just spoken Martian. "Ma'am, HOAs can't detain minors ever." "It's in the bylaws," she insisted, practically shaking with rage. "Your bylaws," the officer said flatly, "are not law." A nearby neighbor chimed in. "She sent those guys after a kid and one pulled a knife." The officer held out his hand. "Ma'am, I need your identification." Karen snatched it from her bag, muttering, "This is harassment. The HOA has full authority." "Not to hire armed men," the officer interrupted. "Not to impersonate police, and certainly not to detain a juvenile." Karen froze. That was the first crack. Then the officers reviewed the neighbors' videos. Clear footage of Ethan being grabbed, pinned, threatened. One clip caught the fake cop pulling the knife. Another captured Karen's SUV arriving and her shouting about corrective custody. An officer approached me. "Sir, do you want to press charges?" I looked at Ethan, bruised, shaken, trying to be strong. "Yes," I said. Every charge applicable, and there were many charges for the fake cops: kidnapping, attempted abduction of a minor, assault, impersonating law enforcement, possession of a weapon during a crime, endangerment of a minor. 2 were taken away in ambulances, their egos bruised, worse than their bodies. The 3rd went straight into the back of a patrol car. Charges for Karen: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, solicitation of unlawful detainment, endangerment, misuse of HOA funds, creating fraudulent bylaws. When the officers escorted her to a squad car, she shrieked, "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." One officer opened the back door. "Not anymore." Neighbors clapped. Someone even cheered. Ethan let out a breath he'd been holding for weeks. The next day, the knife holder received 10 years. The baton guy got 7 years. The one who pinned my son was sentenced to 5 years. Karen herself was sentenced to 4 years in prison, hit with a massive $50,000 fine. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. Karen was unanimously removed. Lawsuits followed, investigations widened, and every homeowner she'd bullied lined up to finally speak out. As for me and Ethan, the police told us we handled everything exactly right. The community treated us like heroes, and those fake cops won't be seeing daylight the same way for a long, long time. When it was over, Ethan looked at me and said, "Dad, what would have happened if you weren't home?" I put a hand on his shoulder. "They'll never get the chance to try again." And that's how Karen learned. If you go after my family, you won't walk away the same. The end.